the parsha begins, of course, with the passing of Sarah, the death of Sarah. And we know that last week's parsha concludes with the story of the Akedah. And the Chazal, the Medrash, the Rashi quotes, is concerned why the juxtaposition, which is a curious question, because we could just say simply that the one event follows the other chronologically. In other words, when do we question the juxtaposition when there's departure from the chronological order? But here, the first noteworthy event that occurred after the Akedah is the passing of Sarah. So it's hard to understand what Chazal are getting at. But Chazal answer that the Akedah was actually the cause of her death. That what happened was that when the Akedah was reported to her, and she heard that her beloved son was almost slaughtered, Parcha Nishmasa, her soul departed. That's what the Medrash says. So there's a question the commentators ask, like this, that we see that Avraham Avinu was able to actually carry out the Akedah. He was prepared to actually slaughter his son. How is it possible that even the thought of it should have such an effect on Sarah that she would die from the fright? If Avram could do it, how is it possible that Sarah couldn't even think about it? So I'd like to share with you two very, very interesting interpretations. One is from the Maral, the other is from a sefer called Beis Yaakov, from the Ishbitzer Rebbe, the son of the Mea Shilayach. The Maral says, a pshat like this: Chazal tell us an amazing thing about Sarah, that Sarah was actually greater than Avram in Ruach HaKodesh. In prophecy, Sarah was greater than Avram. Now, just as an aside, we'll go off on a tangent and just explain what that means, because it's an astounding thing. Avram, we know, reading the stories in the last several weeks, experienced actual revelations of God. God spoke to him, God revealed himself to him. In the Chumash, we don't find ever God speaking to Sarah. We don't find it. Go through the parsha.
I thought he said, why did you laugh?
God said it to Avram. V'yomer Hashem el Avram, lo mozeh tzachaka Sarah. God said to Avram, why did Sarah laugh? Not to Sarah. Look in the Chumash. It says God said it to Avram, right? And Avram went to Sarah, and Sarah denied it. But God spoke to Avram, not to Sarah.
But it says God went to Sarah and she denied
No.
it and spoke to her.
God went to Avram, Avram went to Sarah, and Sarah denied it. Right? It doesn't say it. Look in the Chumash. It doesn't say God spoke to Avram.
Who responded to Sarah when she denied it, the statement that yes, he did?
Now that is a question. There's two pshatim in the Medrash. There is one pshat in the Medrash that Vayomer lo ki tzachak. There is one pshat that God said it, but the other pshat in the Medrash is that also was said by Avram. So it isn't clear. Maybe there is one possibility that there's a half a sentence that God said to Sarah, but certainly doesn't compare to the many times that God spoke to.
If so, it was rebuke.
Spoke to Avram. It happens to be that the Netziv, in the beginning of this week's parsha, explains this. And he says that we're talking about two different things. There is Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh. Now the Netziv uses these terms not the way the Rambam uses them. The Rambam also differentiates between these two terms in a different way, in terms of the quality of the prophetic experience. Nevuah implies an experience which has greater clarity, as opposed to Ruach HaKodesh. But the Netziv understands the terms as follows. Nevuah is where God communicates a substantive message to the Navi. God communicates a substantive message to the Navi, usually for the purpose of conveying this message in turn to the public. That's Nevuah. Ruach HaKodesh is the prophecy that one receives for his or her own enlightenment. an attachment to the divine intelligence for the purpose of one's own enlightenment. Says the Netziv that certainly in terms of being the recipient of a message for publication, Avraham was far, 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 far beyond Sarah. There are many more messages that were communicated to Avraham. Avraham, in turn, conveyed them to his followers. There was no comparison. But in terms of personal enlightenment, Sarah was greater. Sarah was greater. And that's really the context from which Chazal derived this. You know, there's a story which is discussed on last week's Parsha, where there was a difference between Avraham and Sarah, difference of opinion. What to do about Yishmael? Avraham held to keep Yishmael at home. Sarah held to send Yishmael away. So God appears to Avraham and says that whatever Sarah says, listen to her. Because your descendant is not going to be Yishmael, your successor, I should say, better way of putting it, is going to be Yitzchak. Now, Chazal understand that the Hashem here was not just telling Avraham what to do in this one particular circumstance. He was giving Avraham a rule that whenever there's going to be a difference of opinion between you and your wife, always listen to your wife, always defer to her.
Is it defer or listen, or do we take it to be the same?
Pardon?
Hashem didn't say do it; He said listen to her.
Listen to
like
her.
factor it into your decision.
No,
or is He saying you must obey it?
It means do it.
It means do it.
Do it. Right. Now, in this one instance, God told him explicitly to do it. Yitzchak will be a successor. So, but it wasn't only applicable in this situation. God was telling Avraham that whenever you have a disagreement, listen to her. She's right. And from that, Chazal say that it must be that Ruach HaKodesh Sarah was greater than Avraham. Now, we're not talking about a substantive message. We're not talking about Sarah says God said X and Avraham says God said Y. They're having a difference of opinion as to what to do in a given situation. God was telling Avraham, you should know that Sarah's insight, her clarity, is greater than yours. So if there's ever a question as to what to do in a given situation, what the correct decision to make is, defer to her judgment. So we're not talking about a substantive message. A substantive message, certainly, often God communicated to Avraham and not to Sarah. But if there's ever a question of who has the greater insight, the greater understanding, the greater clarity, when it comes to making a decision, you should know it's Sarah, not Avraham. Yeah?
How come Rashi uses the term that Avraham was helpful to serve in Avias?
That's what the Netziv says it means. Well, secondary means in the type of Navias, which means personal enlightenment, as opposed to being given a substantive message. That's what the Netziv understands. Now, why should that be?
You told us last time that he was busy with Kirov. And
So I said the Netziv says this. I start with the Netziv. The Netziv says that Avraham was a public person. He was a public person. He was involved with negotiations with kings and battles and all sorts of things. Sarah was ba'ohel. She was in the tent. What was she doing in the tent? She wasn't baking cookies. You know, in the Chumash, in this one instance, she was actually making bread. But as a rule, she was davening, she was meditating, she was thinking. And therefore, she was able to have a serenity, a menuchas nefesh, and therefore a clarity and a depth of thought, which Avraham couldn't have. Avraham just had too many affairs that he had to tend to have that menuchas nefesh, peace of mind and clarity, to have the level of enlightenment and clarity of thought that Sarah had. Now again, Avraham was a busy man, so when God wanted to send a message to other people, he sent it through Avraham, because that's the rule. Whenever you want a job done, who do you send? A busy man, right? Because busy people get things done. So when God needed a message sent, he would choose Avraham. But when there's a decision to be made, Sarah had the greater clarity and the greater insight, and therefore God said to Avraham, you should know that whenever you have differences, defer to her judgment. By the way, I'll just mention one interesting thing. This is a further tangent, but it's something you should know. There are contradictions in Chazal as to the way in which male intelligence is compared to female intelligence. On the one hand, Chazal say that women have a bina yisera. They have an extra dose of understanding, an extra measure of understanding. On the other hand, Chazal say noshim are daiton kalais. Their minds are light. They are light-headed, which at first glance seems to be a contradiction. The attempts to resolve the contradiction that I've seen are unsatisfactory. So I'll tell you what I think the real pshat is. The pshat is like this, that if you look in all the places in the Talmud where the Talmud invokes the idea of noshim daitan kalos, it always means the idea that women are more susceptible to duress than men. They can be more easily forced into something than men. I don't know whether it's a question of physical weakness or emotional weakness, but if you want to put pressure on one of two parties, it's easier to put pressure on the woman than on the man. What is the proof to this? There's a very beautiful biblical proof to this. When the Nachash wanted to convince human beings to eat from the Eitz Hadas, who did the Nachash start up with? Adam or Chava? Chava. Why? Because it's easier to pressure a woman to pressure a man. Now, it happens to be that that proof can be dismissed. There is a way to weasel out of it. There's another reason God started up with Chava, because the command not to eat was given explicitly to Adam. It was only second-hand transmitted to Chava. So therefore, the Nachash felt that Chava was more susceptible to persuasion than Adam. But I think this is also true. That if you want to put pressure on somebody, you want to twist someone's arm, noshim daiton kalais. They're more susceptible to pressure. But if you can spare them from the pressure, if you allow them the opportunity for detachment, then in terms of insight, the woman has bina yisera. And therefore what you want is, you want your wife to be ba'ohel. She should be in the tent, she should be free from all the pressures, and from her throne in the ohel, she can be an oracle of good judgment. And that's really the idea of bina yisera. They do have a deeper insight. Chazal say that Isha makeres bo'orchim yoser menoesh. That a woman has a greater insight into guests than a man. Say a guest comes to the house, so the husband might be bowled over by this person, his piety, his sitkus. The woman can really see through things. She can see the emes. If he really is a tzaddik, if he's not a tzaddik, a woman is makeres b'orchim yoser menoesh, Chazal say. Now, so Sarah, because she was ba'ohel, she was able to achieve greater understanding, greater insight, even higher levels of spiritual enlightenment, precisely because she was spared from the hustle-bustle intentions of public life. This is something that Sid explains this idea that Sarah was superior to Avraham. So therefore, that's what God said. If you ever have a difference of opinion, there's a question of a decision to be made, rely on Sarah. The Gemara says in the Maseches Sanhedrin that brings a pasuk which says that God does not do anything unless He reveals the secret to the Nevi'im. Meaning, when God communicates a message to one Navi, really all the Nevi'im get the same message. All the Nevi'im who are contemporary with that Navi get the same message. Now the idea is like this, because when God broadcasts, everybody who has antenna to pick up, picks up the message. Because all the Nevi'im are connected to divine intelligence. So when God thinks a thought, all the Nevi'im access it. So this is, God does nothing without revealing the secret to all the prophets. The Gemara says. So the Moral says an amazing pshat. It says like this, that when God told Abraham to perform the Akedah, if this was a genuine nevuah, we would have expected that this should have been communicated to all the prophets. But apparently it wasn't. You see, Sarah didn't know about it. She only heard about it after the fact. So why was that? Because it wasn't a genuine nevuah. In other words, it was a test. It was a trick. Because God was testing Abraham to see whether he would comply. So he tells Abraham, listen, take your son and offer him as a korban. Sarah hears the story and says, you know what happened? God came to Abraham and said that you should offer your son as a korban on Har Moriah. Now, if this was a genuine nevuah, Sarah would have heard it, because that's the way of God. When God communicates genuine nevuah, he communicates it to all the Nevi'im. Certainly Sarah would have heard it, because Sarah was the superior of Abraham in Nevi'im. But Sarah didn't hear it. Why? Because it obviously was not a genuine nevuah. Now Sarah didn't know what it was. Was it a divine test? Was it a self-delusion? Was it an hallucination? Sarah didn't know. But one thing she didn't know, it wasn't a genuine nevuah. And it's not technically, it would have been a genuine nevuah, because, of course, human sacrifice is something which is abhorrent to the Torah.
Yitzchak didn't hear it either.
No. But Yitzchak, right, the Gemara says, had to believe Avraham, because Avraham was a Navi Moshe, was an established Navi, right?
Right, but he didn't hear it.
But Yitzchak himself wasn't a Navi. Sarah herself was a Navi, so if it was true, Sarah would have heard it.
Yitzchak is not considered a Navi?
Not at that point. Not
till after the
Not till after that came.
What about Lech Lecha? Did Sarah hear that?
What?
Did Sarah hear Lech Lecha?
Undoubtedly she did. Undoubtedly she did. If she was a Navi, she would have heard that too.
Yeah.
But this she didn't hear. So this is the problem. So Sarah assumed that Avraham was doing something which was really a mistake. So that is what frightened her to death. The possibility that Avraham almost slaughtered Yitzchak not to fulfill the divine command, but in error. That was unusually frightening. That's what she couldn't accept. So that's the amazing side of the morale. That's why she almost died of fright. Not because, of course, if she would have heard the nevuah from God that Avraham should slaughter Yitzchak, she would have accepted it wholeheartedly. Right? Just like Avraham accepted it. But as far as she knew, there was no such prophecy. She would have heard it if it was true. And therefore it was Avraham perhaps hallucinating or making a mistake and almost slaughtered her beloved son. That was a fright that was so unimaginably difficult that she lost her soul. That's one shot. The Beis Yaakov from the Ishbitzer says an amazing shot. Very interesting thing. And there may be something here, a lesson about Jewish marriage b'chlal. I think we said many times the very interesting interpretation of the Netziv. The Netziv says on Parshas Bereshis, when God made Chava, so he said, "Esalo Eliezer kinegdo." I will make a helpmate opposed to him, opposite him, opposed to him. So what does this mean? A very curious expression. Eliezer kinegdo, a helpmate, but opposed to him. So Chazal say like this. Chazal say that it depends. If a man merits, then his wife will be Eliezer, will be a helpmate. If he's undeserving, kinegdo, she'll be in opposition to him. So what does that mean? She'll be opposed to him. So the Netziv says a very lovely pshat. He says that in reality, both ways, she's the greatest help. He says if he merits, if he's a tzaddik and he's doing the right thing, she'll assist him. She'll assist him to do the right thing. But let's say he's not so worthy, and let's say he has some bad ideas. How will she help him? She'll help him by opposing him. That's the greatest help your wife could be, right? To oppose you when you're going off, when you're going astray. But what better wife is there than the wife who opposes you and saves you from yourself? You know, we read midrashim about wives, we discover Chazal tell us that the wife of Kairach was brought about Kairach's downfall, and the wife of On ben Peles, the conspirator who dropped out of the conspiracy, was saved by his wife. When you read the story, you discover that Kairach's wife was the cause of his downfall precisely because she stood behind her man. As Kairach felt belittled by Moshe Rabbeinu, and Kairach's wife stirred the pot and said, "You're right, and you got to do something, and don't just take a sitting down, and assert yourself." And as a result, she was the inspiration behind Kairach's rebellion, and she brought calamity to her husband. Onan Peles' wife was the opposite. She stood in his way. She established an obstacle to prevent him from joining the conspiracy. That's the greatest help. She saved him precisely by opposing him. This is what the Nesiv says. Ezer Kinegdo. The Sifrei Hasidus says a very, very interesting thing. The Midah of Avram was the Midah of Chesed, was the Midah of kindness. Now we know that kindness sometimes can go too far. So you have to balance kindness with din, with judgment, with self-control, self-discipline. So undoubtedly, say the Sifrei Hasidus, this was the Midah of Sarah. The Midah of Sarah must have been Gevura, must have been din. That's how she was the Ezer Keneged. That's how she was the helpmate. That's how she complemented Avram. She was the balance. The balance of Avram Chesed was Sarah's Gevura. So, for example, let's go back to a familiar story, and we'll see how this plays out. There are two children in the household. You have Yishmael and you have Yitzchak. Yitzchak is destined for greatness, but just because Yitzchak is meant to be the successor doesn't mean that Yishmael has to be sent away. He can be the number 2 son. But he's mitzachek. He is joking with Yitzchak. He is introducing Yitzchak into things that are not acceptable. Well, exactly what mitzachek means, there are various pshatim. Rashi says it was Avodah Zarah, it was Gilui Arayos. I mean, serious things. But however we understand it, it was not consistent with the way that Yitzchak was meant to be brought up. How to deal with that crisis? By the way, I'll mention an interesting thing, just as an aside, that many, many years ago, Rabbi Chaim Dov Keller, who was Yeshiva, tells the Yeshiva in Chicago, wrote an article in the Jewish Observer about the evils of television in the home. And he gave a mashal, he gave a parable to illustrate the evils of television. If you imagine that a guest comes to your door one day, and he asks to be taken in, to welcome him. So you don't know he's a perfect stranger, but you welcome him in. And soon you discover that he's a totally charming individual. He entertains the children, tells nice stories, they love him. And you figure, wow, it's a wonderful thing that we have such a wonderful person around the house and everyone loves him. And then you discover, bit by bit, that this fellow is introducing the children to all sorts of things. He tells them dirty jokes from time to time, and the like. And you realize, wait a minute, as much as I love him, this guy is going to ruin the kids. You have to kick him out of the house. That's what television is. That's when television first was introduced in the 1950s. It was fairly benign and fairly pleasant. Maybe that's a simplification, but at least so it was thought. And, it kept the children busy, enabled the mothers to carry on with their chores, and it was a convenient babysitter, and it's a good thing to have around the house. But after a while, you discover what the television is teaching the children, and it's shocking. It's shocking. And it's not only the programs that are on late at night. I remember that not having watched television in many years, I was in the hospital, not myself, but visiting someone in the hospital, a child in the hospital, and I caught up glimpse of Sesame Street. Even Sesame Street was pretty awful.
Really?
Yeah, it was not for pure eyes to behold. But in any case, so this is the danger. The danger is we introduce things to our children which are unacceptable. So this is what the fear was. The Ishmael was introducing Yitzchak to unacceptable things. So what to do? So Sarah says there's no solution. The only solution is to send him away. Him, his mother, just kick them out of the house, and that's it. And Avram was very, very distressed. Very, very distressed. And finally Hashem says, listen, whatever Sarah says, listen to Sarah. In this instance, she's right. As a rule, she's right. Now, the question is, why are there different perspectives here? Why does Avram see it one way? Why does Sarah see it another way? So the simple explanation we attempt to give is, after all, Yishmael is Avram's son, not Sarah's son. So for Avram, it's very hard to send away Yishmael, and for Sarah, it's very easy, because after all, she has no blood connection to Yishmael. That would be a very simple interpretation. But the Yisrael says, obviously, the issue over here is this. The midah of Avram is the midah of chesed, is the midah of kindness. And kindness, if you take it too far, extends itself even to people that are undeserving. So we're going to send you Yishmael away into the wilderness, into the desert. We have to have rachmanos, we have to have pity. Listen, we can make it work, etc. Sarah's midah is the midah of gevura, the midah of strength, the midah of self-discipline. She's not going to be swayed by considerations of mercy. She does the right thing, as painful as it is. And therefore she understood that the entire success of the future of Klal Yisrael is contingent on this Yishmael being sent away. That's the way it has to be.
What was
Because
the
Baruch Hu
age
said that she's right.
What was the age difference from the baby to the...
13 years.
Actually, it was 13
Maybe
years.
even 14 years.
Okay.
It's a big difference.
But
Big
if the
difference.
children had been reversed,
Pardon?
if the children had been reversed, if Yitzchak had the character of Ishmael the other way around, Sarah would not have suggested to get rid of Yitzchak.
No, that's what the Ishmael is saying, exactly. In other words, if it would have been that Sarah's child was the bad influence on the successor, who was Hagar's child, Sarah would have sent her own child away. That's exactly what the Ishmael is saying. It's not because there was self-interest here because it's her child. It's because Sarah's midah is gevura. Sarah can sacrifice. Sarah can overcome her self-interest. Now, of course, that type of speculation, though, is if I have wheels, there'd be a truck, right? The reason the child Yitzchak was Yitzchak is because his mother was Sarah, right? And the reason Yishmael was Yishmael is because the mother was Hagar. I mean, that is probably the contributing factor. So this is the story where we see that Sarah was the corrective, counterbalance to the midah of Avram. And that's why Avram needed Sarah. Avram needed Sarah. Sarah was the Ezer Kenegdo. Sarah dies after the Akedah. And Avram lived a long time after that. We make a good calculation. Sarah was 127 years old. We know that Avram was 10 years older than Sarah, so Avram was 137 years old. Avram lived to 175. So it's 38 more years. He lived a lot longer than Sarah did. So what happened? He didn't need his Ezer Kenegdo anymore. So listen what the Beis Yaakov says, an amazing thing. We know that the final test, the final nisayon, the ultimate test in the life of Avram was the Akedah. What was the Akedah a test of? What was it meant to achieve? It was precisely this midah. Avram's midah was the midah of chesed. Could he bring himself to perform this tremendous, tremendous act of seeming cruelty to slaughter his own son? And he was ready to do it. He was ready to do it. When he performed the Akedah, or when he was ready to perform the Akedah, God said, Ato Yadati, now I know, Ki Yirei Elokim Ata, you're truly a God-fearing person. Because until now, I knew you were a God-loving person. I knew you were a person who exemplified chesed because you perceived that as being the divine trait. But now I see that you have that discipline, that self-control, you could bring yourself to do the difficult things, the seemingly cruel things. I understand that. It says, that's when Sarah departed from the world. Sarah departed from the world when she knew that she was no longer needed. That's what the Sacker says. When Avram Avinu was able to integrate into himself the midah of Sarah, so that's when Parcha Nishmas, that's when his soul departed. Because as long as Avram needed her, she was there. But when Sarah saw that Avram was able to achieve something that was really characteristic of her, so then that's when she was taken from this world. That's when Parcha Nishmas.
This presages the Yaakov Esau story and the two wives. When it was clear that Esau was not going to fulfill his responsibility as the nation builder,
Right.
then Yaakov had to incorporate that clause.
Yeah.
And have the two wives.
Yeah, but this is what the Sacker says, an amazing interpretation. Okay, that's a little tidbit from the beginning of the parsha. I thought we'd have time for more tidbits, but I guess we're going to just go on to the next tidbit, which is a very, very interesting thing we may have talked about before, which is, if you look at the parsha, there are two halves to the parsha. The first half of the parsha talks about Avraham Avinu's negotiations for the purchase of the Ma'aras Machpelah, the burial place for Sarah. And Avraham goes and he negotiates with the Bnei Ches. If you want a manual as to how to conduct yourself in the Arab shuk, you would not be far off if you would read this story. Because you see the posturing, the formal talk, the magnanimous gestures, which of course are meaningless. I mean, it's really a primer for Middle Eastern negotiations. You know, Abraham comes and says, let me buy the Ma'aras Machpelah, and they say, ha, 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 ha. We wouldn't even dream of taking money. Of course, we'll give it to you for nothing. And Abraham says, no, I've already set aside the money. And Ephraim says, listen, a field which is worth just 400 shekel, what is it between us? So then Abraham learned what the price was. And he understood exactly how much he had to pay. When he started weighing out the money, Ephraim was insistent, no, don't give me 400 regular coins. I want 400 very, very heavy, good quality coins. Anyway, and Ephraim, of course, is the example Chazal give of the Rishoyim, the wicked, who are Oimrim Harbe, who promise the world, Afilu Mat Ein Amoisim, don't come through at all. But in any case, these are the negotiations. And Avraham conducts himself as a Middle Eastern sheik. He speaks and he bows as a show of respect to them, and so on and so forth. The second half of the parsha is the shlichus, the mission of Avraham's servant to go to find a wife for Yitzchak. Now, it's interesting. We all know, every child who's ever learned in Cheder knows that Avraham's servant is Eliezer. But it's an amazing fact, many people don't realize it, how many times is Eliezer's name mentioned in the parsha? Not once. Right? He's always referred to as Ha'eved, 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 the servant, the servant, the servant, never referred to by name. As an aside, I'll mention the significance of that is this, because what does it mean to be an Eved? The essence of what it means to be an Eved is total self-negation vis-a-vis the master. Because an Eved has no life of his own, no existence of his own. He exists solely to serve the master. Now, in reality, there's no such thing as a person who is a 100% Eved. Because you may be owned by somebody else, but you have a life of your own. At night, you read your own books, watch your own TV programs, eat your own food. So to the extent that there is some life of your own, Perhaps you're a 90% Eved, perhaps you're an 85% Eved. There's no such thing as a person who's a 100% Eved at everything that he does. Perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu, who's called Eved Hashem, perhaps you could say that was 100%, because even his eating was to give him strength to serve the Ribbon Shloim, and everything he did was for the Ribbon Shloim, so you could say he was 100% Eved. I don't believe that really slaves or servants could ever achieve this idea of 100%. But Chazal tell us that Eliezer was totally devoted to this mission, because really he had a very strong self-interest in the failure of this mission. Because Eliezer himself had a daughter who he would have wanted to marry off to Yitzchak. And it really would have been a wonderful shidduch. Because Eliezer was Avram's prime disciple. So what better shidduch is there than Avram's son marrying Eliezer's daughter? But Eliezer was of cursed lineage. He was a descendant of Cham, and therefore his children were cursed. That's why Avram rejected the shidduch, and instead trusted Eliezer to go and find a wife for Yitzchak from his family. That's an amazing thing. You see how trusted he was. That as you send a person whose self-interest is in the failure of the mission, but this is the person you trust. That's not the kind of person you want to send. You want to send a person whose self-interest is to achieve success, not whose self-interest is to achieve failure. But Avram knew who he was dealing with. This was a person who was so devoted to his master that he had the power to put aside his own self-interest and serve his master 100% conscientiously. And it's an amazing thing. Chazal tell us that when he successfully achieved the mission, so Lavan called him Baruch Hashem, blessed to God. And Chazal say that you see from here that when a person does his shlichus, does his mission faithfully, he is no longer under the category of cursed and becomes blessed. And it's an amazing, amazing thing that this was really the fulfillment of Eliezer's very purpose in being in this world.
But that
Apart from being cursed, to become blessed through the faithful service to Avraham. What does it really mean?
Would that have applied to his children? No.
I don't know. But in any case, so this is the second half of the parasha. Now, when we look at this half of the parasha, we find an amazing thing, that Eliezer appears to be a religious fanatic. Right? Eliezer is always praying to God, bowing to God, thanking God. If you look at the story, whenever something happens, he's bowing in gratitude. He prays to God for assistance when it comes through, and the girl happens to be a member of Avram's family. He thanks God, and really, exactly as you would expect a religious person to speak. Baruch Hashem, Emir Hashem, Be'ezvus Hashem, everything, bowing down. In contrast to Avram. Avram seems to be a totally secular person. There's no mention of God's name. There's no mention of bowing, no mention of thanking, no mention of praying. In his dealings with the Breitowitz, you would have no inkling that this person had any religious orientation at all. It's an amazing thing. The contrast is amazing. What's particularly amazing is this distinction in light of the fact that we know that Eliezer, in two parashas before, had a nickname called Damasek Eliezer. Now, Damasek Eliezer means Damascus. He was from the city of Damascus. Damascus is one of the most ancient cities in the world. He was from Damascus. But Chazal say that the word Damasek also is a contraction of the phrase Dole Umashke. He would draw from the well springs of his Rebbe's teachings and give others to drink from them. And he was the conduit through which other people received the teachings of Avraham Avinu, which implies that Eliezer was not an innovator. That what Eliezer taught to others is that which he received from Avraham. So how can we account for this totally different approach to life? That in Avraham everything was hidden, and Eliezer, everything was very, very public. The Sfas Emes says an amazing thing. Sfas Emes is like this. This is something we have to really understand. When we serve God, we really are playing to an audience of one, which is God. There is an ideal that our service of God should be bilti l'Hashem levado. It's only for God. My piety is not meant to be worn on my sleeve. It's not meant to be public. It's not meant to be displayed for other people. I don't show off by acting in a pious way. I serve the Ribono Shel Olam, and everything I do is b'hatzneya. There's a modesty. There's even a concealment. I seek anonymity. That's the goal. I'm fond of telling the story of the person that came to me and said that why don't I start marketing tapes in my classes? So I said, why would I want to do that? So he says, well, then you become famous. So I said, well, why would I want to be famous? So he said, well, then you can, people would invite you to speak all over the world. I said, well, why would I want that? Maybe even more famous. But why would I want that? Because then people would invite you and they'd pay you. Oh, money, I understand. That I understand. But the idea of fame is total madness. Total madness. Whereas a Jew has to serve bilti l'Hashem levado. And that was the way of Avram. If you would follow Avram around for 24 hours, or even for a week, or even for a month, you would not see any overt signs of piety. You would not see ecstatic prayer. You would not see bowing. You would not see exclamations of religious fervor. Avram, you follow him around, you'd see simplicity. You'd see a person who's kind to other people, who treats other people with dignity. He bows to the Bnei Ches. There's etiquette calls for that. He negotiates. He speaks to them in the manner in which they're accustomed to be spoken to. And that was the nature of Avram. But people of great insight who would follow Avram would be able to read between the lines. And they would know that that's only on the surface, to eyes that notice superficialities. But people who can read deeper will notice when Avram moves his hand like this, there are lofty kavanas. There are divine secrets that Avram is engaged in. And when Avram bends his head this way, Avram is thinking about who knows what. And when Avram lifts his fork to eat, who knows what lofty kavanas there are in his eating, and so on and so forth. But the average person wouldn't notice it. So the average person, Avram's piety was not noticeable. Avram was incognito, totally inconspicuous. But Eliezer, who was his Talmud, was his disciple, he understood it clearly. And Eliezer saw as his mission the imperative to communicate this and to spread these ideas to other people. Avram could afford to be private because he had Eliezer who would do his publicity for him. In other words, Eliezer was the person who would be doile umaske mitaras rabalacher. He would tell people, you should know, don't think Avram was this is what it means, and this is what he's doing, and this is what he's thinking, and this is how he's acting, and this is his kavanah, and these are his observances, and these are his teachings. And therefore Avram could be, so to speak, as they say in Yiddish, behalten. He could be very, very private, and Eliezer would reveal to the world what really was going on. So everything Eliezer did was really nothing more than the teachings of Avraham Avinu. It was just Avraham Avinu carried them out in a very, very quiet, still, hidden way, and Eliezer revealed to the world exactly what was going on. Now this is something which is very important to know. If any of you are planning on becoming a Hasidic Rebbe in the near future, I don't know if this is part of your career path or not, but if you're contemplating becoming a Rebbe, you should know this, that there's always a great danger when you are a leader of people, that it can become a personality cult. In other words, really a Jewish leader is meant to be a conduit. He's just like a pipeline, a channel that connects the followers to the Ribono Shel Olam. There's nothing in it for him. As we know that what is the quintessence of a Jewish leader is the king. Right? A Jewish king is really the essence of a Jewish leader. And the Zohar HaKadosh says that the midah of Malchus, the defining characteristic of kingship, is less migar meklum. It has nothing for itself. Right? The king is not meant to take anything for himself. Not money, and not honor, and not the adoration of the people. Nothing is for himself. Everything is just a means of connecting people to the national ideal, which of course for the Jewish people is the service of the Ribono Shel Olam. But of course there's a very great danger in how many people successfully pass this test. You know, it becomes about me. You know, I hate to bring politics into it, but I will. Maybe I shouldn't say I hate to bring politics into it, well, but you know, it's a distraction. But you know, I think this is the criticism that has been raised against the current president of the United States, that it's all about him. It's all about him. So just to give today's example, when as a candidate he wanted to look presidential, it was very important to him to go to Berlin. You know, to speak at the Brandenburg Gate and, you know, look as if he was the Gilgal of John Kennedy. But when it came to you know, today's event, you know, the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, so here you would have to give credit to presidents of the other party, you know, who brought this breath of freedom to Germany. You know, that was something he had no time for. Because it wasn't about him. And if it's not about him, then it's not important. That's the antithesis of what genuine Malchus is. Genuine Malchus is never about the king. It's always about the country. It's always about the nation. It's always about the national ideal. And therefore, a Jewish leader has to bend over backwards to make sure that it doesn't become a personality cult. You know, the Gemara says in Maseches Yoma, it's an interesting thing, that that really ein ma'amidim parnas ala tzibur, that God, when he has to appoint a leader, he only appoints leaders that are skeletons in their closet. Ein ma'amidim parnas ala tzibur ala im kein kupa shel shratzim tluya me'achayav. God doesn't appoint a leader unless the leader has a bag of vermin slung over his shoulder. Meaning, as we would say it, a skeleton in his closet. Why? Because if he becomes haughty, so there's a reminder, just look behind you and see there's nothing to be haughty about. Now, that was David HaMelech. David HaMelech had skeletons in his closet. But Shaul HaMelech, his predecessor, did not. He did not have skeletons in his closet. And it's an amazing thing. The Gemara says, on the same page, the two Gemaras. One Gemara says that the reason his Malchus didn't last is because there was no imperfection in Shaul, which means he didn't have that safeguard. So there was the danger of his becoming haughty. On the same page, the Gemara says that the reason his Malchus didn't last is because he was mochel on his covenant. He forgave his honor. That early in his reign, there was an episode in which he was humiliated by various people that didn't bring tribute to him as they should have, and Shaul was mochel, he forgave his honor, and therefore he was punished. So it's an apparent contradiction. On the one hand, the fear is that he'll become haughty. On the other hand, he's punished because he forgave his honor. He was willing to concede his honor. It seems to be a contradiction. I once heard from one of my Rebbeim, the pshat is like this, that Shaul knew he was perfect. Right? Therefore he had to bend over backwards and refuse even the honor that was due to him. That's also not a good idea. You can't be a functional king if you don't accept the honor that's due to you. You have to accept it, but you have to accept it not for yourself. You know, there was a great Rebbe, the Rizhiner, and The Rishner, as you may know, lived in the manner of royalty. I don't want to get into the mystical aspects of it, but the world says that he was the Merkava of the Midah of Malchus. He was the embodiment of the divine trait of kingship in this world. He was a king, lived in a palace. I mean, other Rebbes disapproved. The Chaim was quick with the Rishner, but it's a complicated parsha. But it said that the Rishner wore boots, very, very beautifully carved boots. I mean, the type of boots that a king would wear, but the boots had no soles. So, in other words, from appearance's sake, it looked like he was wearing these very, very rich boots, but really he was walking barefoot on the hard ground. That's really the idea we're talking about. I don't know if the story is true, but that's the idea of finding this balance. And there's really nothing for yourself. In other words, it's the honor of the people, the honor of the nation. And therefore, the leader has to be very, very careful. And that's Avraham Avinu. In other words, Avraham Avinu did not want this to be about him. And therefore, there was no overt piety. Everything was concealed. Everything was secret. Everything was not visible. But there was a reality that he was totally double, totally attached to the Ribono Shel Olam. So how was it demonstrated? It was realized by a student, and the student taught it to the masses in the name of the Rebbe. There was no danger of the student becoming the center of a personality cult, because he wasn't teaching anything about himself. He was attributing everything to his master. So this was the perfect resolution of the issue. And again, even if you're not planning on becoming a Chassidish Rebbe, whatever you're planning on becoming, it has to be clear that our service is to the Ribono Shel Olam. There's nothing in it for ourselves.